Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show that covers all things marketing. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast gives you the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. Whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand, you've come to the right place. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie, and guess what, everybody? Happy birthday to us. This is our 30th episode of the GSMC Marketing Podcast. I know 30 doesn't seem like a huge number or like a crazy number for a podcast, but I mean, when you're 23, 30 seems like the scariest age to reach. So let's celebrate our 30th birthday together by making sure that everybody who is currently listening to this podcast is subscribed to this podcast. I would absolutely love to see all of you interacting with our social media and being subscribed to this podcast. It really would just mean the world to me, and you get a lot of really great benefits out of it. I mean, we post new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're always talking on our social media and interacting with you guys. So I would just really love to carry on this conversation outside of the podcast as well, because I want to hear from you and hear what you want me to talk about. And if you have questions, I would love to give answers, or if I don't know the answer, I'll find a way to answer it for you. So go ahead and write questions in the review down below or reach out through social media. Okay, everyone. So to celebrate the 30th birthday of the GSMC Marketing Podcast, I thought we would do a really fun episode and talk about one of my personal favorite shows, Friends. I mean, who doesn't love the show Friends? I'm going to be honest. If you don't, I would like to ask why. I mean, there's 6 characters who are individually unique and hilarious, so I can't see a world in which you can't at least relate to one of them and then think the show's kind of funny because you relate to them. So if you don't like the show Friends, leave. I don't even want you listening to this podcast anyways. I'm kidding. But if you don't love the show Friends, I would love for you to write in the review down below why not, and a recommendation for another show I could talk about and their marketing, because here's the fact, you can love it or you can hate it. Friends did some killer marketing campaigns for the 10 years it was on, and they continue to control the world of marketing even today. So we are going to talk about all that and more on today's episode. So get ready, guys, because we are taking a deep dive into the Central Perk marketing. Before we get into all of that, though, I do have some updates for you guys on some news stories we have been following over the past 30 episodes. And they're marketing news, but they're also just news that relates to our world and what is happening in our world. Because whether you're in marketing, whether you own a small business, or if you're the CMO of a really big company, or maybe you just are curious about the marketing world, these stories are just so impactful to that world. So I do think they're important to check in on them every now and then. The first one is a story that I have been following hard, and it is heartbreaking every time I get an update about it, but it is the Lizzie McGuire reboot. So a lot of people were really excited when Disney Plus announced the reboot. They announced a lot of reboots actually at D23 this year, but Lizzie McGuire was sort of the tentpole, and people were excited. Hilary Duff was signed on to the project. They got Gordo back. They were bringing back so many of the original cast members and story writers, and even the original writer of the show and showrunner was brought on to run this show. People were pumped. People were excited, including Hilary Duff. She seemed pretty thrilled about the whole thing too. And even Disney Plus, when they released their trailer for the shows that were coming in January, they had the cliffhanger of that trailer be Hilary Duff saying, "Oh, I'm here, I'm Lizzie," or something like that. So people were clearly excited. Disney Plus was clearly excited about the show, and then it got put on pause. Like, what? What do you mean it got put on pause? It got put on pause when the showrunner, Terry Minsky, was fired. So the update that we have for you guys is that Hilary Duff has been pretty closed-mouthed about it for a while. She is finally speaking out about what is happening and the future of the show. I mean, she hasn't given us a lot to go on here, but it does leave us a little bit in the dark, but at least there's a flashlight in the dark now. So late on Tuesday night, Duff posted a screenshot to her Instagram story of the news headline about the planned Disney Plus series, Love, Simon. It has been moved to Hulu after it was deemed not family-friendly enough for Disney Plus. In her post, Hilary Duff circled the words family-friendly in the headline and wrote, "Sounds familiar, ... So people are assuming this is her saying, hey guys, the reason Terry Minsky was fired, the reason we are on pause for the show, the reason we don't know what's happening to the show is because Disney Plus has deemed us to be not family friendly. Now, obviously she did not say that. Obviously she did not actually talk about Disney Plus or any word of mention of Terry Minsky or the Lizzie McGuire show. But I think this post really comes from what she didn't say. And she's also very clever to put it in her story, something that will disappear from her profile in 24 hours. I'm not saying that everybody didn't screen grab that, because I definitely did, and I sent it to people being like, what do you think this means? Because obviously we're all waiting to hear from her as to what's going on. She is the one that announced the show was going to be rebooted, so we're all waiting for her to give us an update, and this is the closest we've gotten. The next day, Terry Minsky finally spoke out about her firing. So for those of you that don't know, Terry Minsky was the showrunner for Lizzie McGuire, who was fired 2 days after Hilary Duff left for her honeymoon. So Terry Minsky finally spoke out about her being fired and said, "I am so proud of the 2 episodes we did. Hilary has a grasp of Lizzie McGuire at 30 that needs to be seen. It is a wonderful thing to watch. I would love the show to exist, but ideally I would love it if it could be given that treatment of going to Hulu and doing the show that we were doing. That's part of where I am completely in the dark. It's important to me that the show was important to people. I felt like I wanted to do a show that was worthy of that kind of devotion." At this time, no new showrunner has been named, though meetings with potential replacements for Minsky are said to be going on. It is possible that the show still could move forward if a new showrunner is named. However, they would have to balance both what Hilary Duff wants, as she is the star of the show, and they can't really do it without her, but they also have to do what Disney wants because, Disney's the one paying for it, and they do own the show. So it is definitely a bit of a sticky wicket, if you will. Disney Plus did spoke out and say, "We paused production on Lizzie McGuire a few weeks ago to allow for some creative redevelopment. Our goal is to resume production and to tell an authentic story that connects to the millions who are emotionally invested in the character and a new generation of viewers too." What I do think is happening, though, is that Disney Plus wanted to use the Lizzie McGuire reboot not only to give something to those fans who have always loved Lizzie McGuire, but I'm hoping they will gain a new popularity with a new generation who has never even heard of Lizzie McGuire. At the time that Lizzie McGuire was originally released, it gained huge popularity. They had a movie. It was like a huge marketing pull for them. And so I believe that they were hoping that that could happen again with a new generation and that they would have triple the amount of fans for the Lizzie McGuire show. However, and I think this is the problem with marketing reboots, is that you never know who you're supposed to be marketing it to. Are you marketing it to a new generation? Are you marketing to the old generation? Are you trying to get the character to grow up with that generation? Because the fact is that I think a lot of people would have loved a reboot of Lizzie McGuire and to see her be in her 30s and to see her act like she's in her 30s and dealing with real life problems that a 30-year-old has. But then those people, and they're people who are my age currently, are only going to watch a few episodes of that. They're not curious enough to watch an entire series about that because it's something from their past. So if you have a character that's like 30 years old and acting like a 30-year-old, that's not going to address the younger generation that is going to be dedicated enough to keep watching. So you're trying to appease both sides, and that's never going to work. And I think, unfortunately, that is the problem that is happening with the Lizzie McGuire reboot, that they really just don't know who they're supposed to be marketing it to, and so it's getting sort of lost in the shuffle. A lot of other shows go through a similar sort of hiccup. Gilmore Girls, the reboot, definitely did. But the one show that's actually done it quite successfully is the High School Musical reboot that is also on Disney Plus. I grew up in a generation where the High School Musical series was, a really big deal. I was quite young, so it came out and I was really interested in it. But since this reboot features none of the original cast, none of the original storylines, it kind of exists in a world outside of the original series, I had no interest in watching it. However, my younger sister, who wasn't alive yet when the first one came out, she didn't have this like baggage carrying around of like, oh, what about Sharpay? Oh, what about Troy? No, she could just enjoy this new series. So unfortunately, I think the Lizzie McGuire show is just lost in a bit of a shuffle, and they don't know what they're going to do, and they don't know who they're going to market it to. So what I would love to hear is how you guys would market the Lizzie McGuire reboot. Would you market it to the audience that has been loving it for years and they're interested in seeing a more adult, grown-up Lizzie, or would you try to market it to a younger generation and forget about the old generation? So let me know in the comments below or reach out through social media. Our second story of today is that Starbucks is reopening most of their China locations as new coronavirus infections fall. This is early signs of recovery, so Starbucks feels comfortable reopening more of their stores. Starbucks said on Thursday that 85% of its China stores are open after closing more than half of them amid the coronavirus outbreak. CEO Kevin Johnson wrote in a letter to the employees, "With the number of new cases in China slowing, we are seeing the early signs of recovery in the region. As a result, the situation is improving throughout the major parts of China. We now have 85% of stores open across China and continue to assess the ongoing impact." Earlier this month, Starbucks said it had temporarily closed more than half of its stores in China, saying that was necessary to protect the safety of our partners and our customers, and we also want to make sure that we do our part to not help spread the virus in this country. That was Starbucks' China CEO, Belinda Wong, and she also said in a video posted on Twitter from inside the 30,000 square foot Shanghai Roastery, a popular destination that reopened on Wednesday after 30 days of being closed. So it's really great getting to see that Starbucks is reopening in China, but also it was always very, I don't know how to say it. It is impressive just how quickly they responded to the outbreak and how quickly those 85% of stores were closed, because like they said in the statement, they really just wanted to do their part to help not spread the virus more. And obviously Starbucks would be like not a breeding ground for the virus, but people are obviously touching a lot of things. A lot of things are hand to mouth. And so it would make sense for them to be closed during the outbreak, but it's really great to see that they are reopening now. Our third story is very similar, and it's that Amazon is telling their employees to pause non-essential travel in the U.S. due to the coronavirus. The spokesperson said, in January, Amazon said it was restricting employees' travel to China until further notice amid the coronavirus outbreak. The company also recommended that employees who are expected to travel back from one of the affected provinces of China work from home for 2 weeks. Amazon urged employees who experience any symptoms to seek medical attention before returning to the office. So that's all really interesting, just to compare the Amazon story to the Starbucks story, that Amazon is still restricting employees from traveling during the outbreak virus, whereas Starbucks is reopening their stores in China. Now, a lot of you are probably like, hey, Mackenzie, what does any of this have to do with marketing? Well, it has a lot to do with marketing. Thank you for asking. It's because it's how they're handling the situations and how differently they're handling the situations. Obviously, these are two very big companies in the marketing industry and just in the world right now. And so when a worldwide crisis such as the coronavirus breaks, they obviously have to respond in a very official way. And so I always like reflecting on these stories just to take a look at how they are respecting the situation and how they're dealing with it from both an internal perspective, but also an external of how they look to the rest of the world. So two very different stories, but two very similar ideas, but very different outcomes. So let me know what your thoughts are of Amazon and Starbucks and how they've been reacting to the coronavirus in the review down below, or reach out through social media. Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, we are going to be getting right into Friends. So stay tuned for that, because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll be right back.
Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast covers everything tech. The hottest mobile phones, tablets, games. We review it, rate it, test it. Whether you're Microsoft, or Apple, Android, or iPhone. We'll give it to you again. Black and white. The Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. On today's episode, it is a very special edition of the GSMC Marketing Podcast because it is our 30th episode, and I just want to take a minute to thank everybody who has been listening to the podcast every week, who has commented on our YouTube videos, who writes a review, who reaches out through social media, and even if you're not doing any of those things, thank you for listening. Honestly, it means the world to me. I love doing this podcast. I love getting to talk to you guys about marketing and share what I know, but also it's a really great opportunity for me to learn more. And I'm learning with you guys. A lot of this stuff I have to research beforehand, obviously. I just don't know all these facts and stacks about friends marketing. Like, I obviously do put a lot of research and work into this podcast. So it's always really great when I hear positive responses from you guys. And I love doing it, so thank you so much for listening because I really, really love it. So I'm going to stop saying how much I love this podcast and actually just get into doing the podcast. In today's episode, we are focusing on Friends. The reason I picked Friends for the 30th birthday is because they're having close to their 30th birthday. The show's been off the air for almost 10 years. They had a 20th anniversary not too long ago, and then a 25th anniversary not too long ago either. And now they're coming back for a reboot. So nothing is stopping Friends. The show may have ended in 2004, but it is still going strong. It is still thriving. And why? Why is it still thriving? Why is a show about 6 New Yorkers living their lives in their 20s and their 30s thriving in 2020? Because of their marketing, because of the marketing they did when the show was on, because of the marketing they still continuously do. And it's not just the Friends, it's not just Warner Brothers who markets the show. Other companies benefit from marketing with Friends. Even if you just have like the smallest indication of Friends on your branding, people lose their minds over that. People love that show, and people are so committed to being a part of that world and being a part of that phenomenon that is Friends, that they're willing to buy a $40 cookie set because it was mentioned on Friends. Like, this is a real thing. We're going to talk about that more later. So I really want to talk about sort of the cult following around Friends and how they used marketing to create that. And we're going to talk about how you can use some of the strategies that Friends used in your own marketing. I'm not saying that, your product is going to get as popular as the TV show Friends, but damn it, we're going to try. We're going to try for you guys, all right? So get that pen and paper out, get your iPhone out, start taking notes, because to start things out, we are going to talk about some stats and facts about everybody's 6 favorite friends. So to start out with, I mentioned earlier how much I researched these episodes beforehand and all the work that goes into creating these segments for you guys, but this one was incredibly hard because every time I would Google like Friends facts, stats about the actual show would come up. And like fun facts that you guys don't care about. This is a marketing podcast. Nobody cares like that Rachel actually dated some of the actors that played her boyfriend. Like, nobody is going to care about that. So it was actually incredibly hard to find solid numbers and solid facts about how many people were watching Friends, how often it was streamed on Netflix, what it sold for. So I think that also just speaks to the marketing of it in general, of that when you look at Friends, when you research Friends, you're looking at the show. You're not looking at the world outside of it, which is so unique to that show. And it's something that not a lot of other shows can do. So just to start with, that on its own is something that is so unique to the show and to the brand. Our first fact is that Jennifer Aniston is the richest cast member of Friends. Her net worth is around $170 million. Courtney Cox is right behind her with $120 million. Matthew Perry and Matt LeBlanc both coming in with $80 million. The reason those numbers are so important is because we're going to talk about it later on, but they were one of the first casts in TV history to all negotiate together until they all made the same amount of money, which ended up being in their final season $1 million an episode. So these people are stacked, and I can only imagine how much money the creators of the show actually make as well. Those numbers are not published, and also obviously this is how much Jennifer Aniston is worth. This is not how much she made on Friends, but obviously, especially with people like Matthew Perry, this can be an indication to how much she made on Friends. Our second fact is that at the time of their syndication negotiations, the show's executives agreed that each cast member would receive 2% of the show's back-end profits. According to several reports, the hit series continues to generate massive revenue and makes Warner Brothers around $1 billion every year. That means each cast member pulls in $20 million every year from reruns. What? First of all, let's just focus on the first half of that fact, is that Warner Brothers still makes $1 billion off of Friends. The show has been off of the air for over a decade, and it is still pulling in $1 billion every year. I bet if you look at some of the shows currently on Warner Brothers, they're not making close to that, guys. They could be making kind of close to that, but a show that's been off the air, a show that doesn't have any new storylines, a show that is never going to develop any further, is pulling in $1 billion. Also, imagine having done a job for 10 years in your 20s, and now every year you get $20 million because you worked for 10 years when you were 20? I would freaking love it if Five Guys, the place that I worked when I was 20, paid me $20 million every year because I did just such an excellent job serving burgers. That's not gonna happen. Want to know why? I wasn't marketed with Five Guys. I wasn't a part of the package deal, whereas, you know what, Matthew Perry was a part of the package deal with Friends, so maybe he deserves $20 million every year. The original title for Friends was Insomnia Cafe. So I wanted to put this fact in here because I think it's such a good, recognition of how smart the Friends marketing was, but how close it was to being bad. And like we talked about in the Twilight episode of the podcast, which you can go listen to, is called Bloodthirsty Marketing, of how there were all these really silly names that Stephenie Meyer almost called Twilight, and then her marketing team was like, no, call it Twilight, make it really simple. And this is sort of a similar way of Insomnia Cafe is an interesting title, but it's not something as classic and not something as relevant to every generation who will ever watch the show as Friends is. We all have friends. Even if you're a loner sitting on your computer, there is some idea in your mind of what friendship is, and so you're going to connect with that title way more than Insomnia Cafe. The hit song I'll Be There For You by The Remembrance was never a full-length song. It was only ever written as a theme song for the TV show Friends. However, after a radio station played it on a loop, it began getting a lot of requests and airtime. So The Remembrance decided to write that second verse and then release it as a single. For 8 weeks, the song topped the Billboard Hot 100 airplay list in the U.S. and also peaked at number 1 in Canada for 5 weeks in a row. This song, guys, I listen to this song sometimes when I run. It has nothing to do with Friends. It's just a catchy song. So it's really interesting to see that it wasn't ever written for it to be a single, but it was written for a TV show. And then when the show blew up, the song blew up, and everything just sort of worked out. Our fifth fact is that Lisa Kudrow didn't know how to play the guitar. So the original character of Phoebe was supposed to be a serious musician that could actually sing and could actually play the guitar. However, when Lisa Kudrow was given the part and then it was revealed that she actually didn't know how to play guitar and they tried to get her lessons and it didn't work, they decided to change the character to make her believe that she was good at playing guitar and make her believe that she was good at singing, and that everyone just sort of bops along to it and they, do it to amuse her, but they're all aware that she's not good at it other than herself. She's not very self-aware of that. And I think that is such a good example of how they had an original idea, they had a problem, but instead of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, they decided to fix it so that it would better fit her and the needs of the character. Because they also could have had her fake it, guys. It could have been 10 years of fake guitar playing while someone behind a microphone is actually playing the guitar. So it's just such a great example of how A problem was introduced in their world, and they found a way to solve it creatively, and it made the difference in the show. People absolutely love the song Smelly Cat. I own a t-shirt that says Smelly Cat. Like, people, it was one of those things that really got the cult, like, attached to the show. Number 6, they were the first TV cast to negotiate as a group. So I talked about this a little bit briefly earlier. But during the first season, each cast member was receiving around $22,000 per episode. But by the second season, each actor had a slightly different salary, including Jennifer Aniston and David Schwimmer, who were offered more money. In 1997, all 6 cast members refused to work until they all earned an equal salary of $100,000 per episode. By the 10th season, they were all making $1 million per episode. So what I really love about that is that it's so similar to the show. It was the idea of the show that these people are like your family. It is a time in your life when your friends are your family and they're all going to stick together. So watch these 6 people stick together. And in real life, they did the same thing. And I think publishing that information really does just shine a light on the show and makes you feel warm and fuzzy because you're like, oh, of course they all wanted to be together and make the same amount of money. So it like markets for the show by them making more money. Like it was this weird cyclical thing of, well, they're going to make more money so that they can keep making more episodes and we're going to want to keep watching them because they're all together. Like it's very repetitive, but it's very, very successful, which is why they probably published that information. It is the second most streamed show on Netflix, which is why I was still so surprised that Netflix got rid of it. However, it does make sense now that the reboot is coming out on HBO Max, and Netflix obviously just couldn't carry the weight of a Friends reboot, perhaps. I don't know. I would have liked to have seen a statement for Friends and a statement from Netflix as to if they knew about the reboot or if they were totally blindsided by that information. Our 8th and final fact is that there are 236 episodes of Friends. That is a lot of episodes. That's a lot of content that they generated. But obviously it's a lot of successful content considering they all still make like $20 million a year off of those 236 episodes. So, you know what? I take back what I said earlier. I don't even think I worked 200 shifts at Five Guys, so maybe I don't deserve their profits to this day. So I'll give that one to Matthew Perry. He can have that one. Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, I'm going to give you the 8 strategies that the Friends marketing team used to market the TV show.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and on today's episode, we are talking about those 6 crazy characters that we all just love to watch and have a little giggle at. I'm talking about Monica, Chandler, Joey, Rachel, Ross, and Phoebe. The 6 characters that lit up our screens every Thursday night for 10 years on NBC, and now they still live in our hearts. They live on our Netflix queue, and now we are finally getting that reboot that we've all been waiting for. So what a better way to, 1, celebrate the 30th episode of the GSMC Marketing Podcast, 2, celebrate the reunion of Friends, and 3, learn how they created that cult following that we all seem to be madly in love with. How did they do it? They used marketing. So on today's episode, right now, I want you to crack out that pen and paper, get your do-a-ting out, get your marketing book out, whatever you do, because I'm going to give you the 8 strategies that the Warner Brothers marketing team, the Friends marketing team, maybe Jennifer Aniston herself was out there hanging flyers of Friends during the first season trying to get it to be popular, because here are the 8 strategies that they used for their marketing. So number 1, they knew their customer. They knew the importance of selling to people, not demographics. So it's not like somebody took a look at the demographics for Friends in season 2 and said, seems like a lot of 20-year-olds are watching our show. We should probably talk more about them being in their 20s and talk more about 20-year-old problems and talk about whatever new thing is cool with 20-year-olds. At the time, it was probably like Jonathan Taylor Thomas. I don't know what was cool in 1994 if you were 20 years old. I won't lie. I wasn't even born yet. But instead of doing that, they said, okay, 20-year-olds like our show. Why do 20-year-olds like our show? It's because they were talking to 20-year-olds as if they were people, as if they were going through the same things that Jennifer Aniston was going through and Courtney Cox was going through, and they could sort of be path setters for them, and they could sort of create a world for 20-year-olds to go to and feel like they were being heard and that they were being listened to. So instead of selling to 20-year-olds, they decided to sell to the people instead. It didn't matter about their age. It didn't matter about their race, sex, job, or anything like that. They were just people, just like the characters. So they knew how to sell to their customers. They also understood, and we talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the podcast in reference to the Lizzie McGuire reboot, but they understood that the people who were 20 in 1994 were not 20 in 2004 when the show was ending. So as the show got older, as the characters in the show got older, as did the audience. So it made sense that, problems you were dealing with in your 20s weren't going to be on the show anymore. But problems you were dealing with in your 30s was going to be on the show. A really great example is in season 1, Monica can't find a boyfriend. In season 10, she is now married, happily married, but is having problems conceiving a child. And I know so many women who, even in their late 20s, early 20s, and then again in their 30s, can't have a baby and they're struggling with that, or they're struggling with not having a boyfriend. Or I know guys who are struggling with not having a girlfriend and just struggling with relationships. But then when you're in your 30s and maybe you're in a relationship, not saying you have to be, but maybe you are, you're then dealing with new problems and new situations. So the characters advanced, the plots advanced, the jokes advanced because the audience did as well. Number 2, consistency across all channels. So although the characters were always growing up and the jokes were always changing and adapting with the times, and they always knew how to advance the show without changing the show. The core of Friends, the brand of Friends, was that it was 6 people who loved each other like they were family, even though they were just friends. And that they were in this crazy stage in their life where they were making mistakes, and it was okay to make mistakes because even if it's not your day, year, month, whatever the lyric is, you have your friends and they're going to be there for you. So because of that, as long as that was always consistent in every episode, in every season, in every joke, they were able to then grow the characters. But that had to stay consistent to the show's messaging because that was the brand of the show. A really great example of how they did consistency across all of their channels was how every episode is called The One Where, or The One With, or The One Why, or How. Like, it always starts with The One, which is why a very clever name for this podcast is The One Where we talk about marketing, in case everybody missed that joke. But that just shows of how, the show was changing, the storylines were changing, but they always kept the titles consistent. And it was just sort of a reflection of that core idea and their core brand. And having the one where is very similar to how all of your marketing products should always have your logo on them. They knew what sold and they knew how to market that. So they understood that, in that first season when it came out, Jennifer Aniston wasn't Jennifer Aniston yet. I mean, she was obviously famous because she was on Friends, and Friends was a new show, and I believe her dad was also really famous, and she had been in like a few other films and such. But they understood of like, oh hey, she appears to be one of the main female characters of our show, and one of our demographics, one of our customers are women. Maybe we should consider creating the Rachel hairstyle. And then that blew up. People absolutely loved the Rachel hairstyle. That was a phenomenon all on their own. So they understood of how they looked at their cast and how they looked at the characters and the world they created and how to market that outside of the world. And the Rachel hairstyle is just one example of that, right? Like you also have the song and you have Central Perk and you have merchandise. But the Rachel haircut is such a specific example because it was clear that they looked at the show, they looked at something that really, really worked for the show, and then they marketed that to the audience. Number 4, they weren't afraid to stand out. So there were a lot of things that Friends did that obviously seemed very similar to Seinfeld. I know Jerry Seinfeld has spoken out quite a bit about how he thinks Friends is just a ripoff of Seinfeld, but it's not, Jerry. So why don't you curb your enthusiasm somewhere else, all right? Because I'm not here for that. Friends by no means was like an original idea or something that was like breaking the glass ceiling or something that was so crazy and out there. It was a show about people. There were tons of shows about people, but they weren't afraid to stand out with their jokes that they had, the storylines that they had, or the characters they casted, or anything like that. They were never afraid to sort of take that extra jump, do something a little extra, and sort of challenge the idea of what was going on outside of them. Number 5, they stood for something. So at the end of the day, Friends really is a TV show about 6 people. But those 6 people were all so unique, and it was so important that although it may never seem like the correct thing to have Rachel get pregnant and then her not marry Ross, they still did that because it was the point of the show. That was her character. That was the way the storyline was going. So they always ensured that if they did something, they were going to stand by what they did. Number 6, connecting with people outside of the show. So obviously Friends created 6 very famous actors. Matt LeBlanc, Matthew Perry, David Schwimmer, Lisa Kudrow, Courtney Cox, and Jennifer Aniston are all very famous now because of Friends. But at its time, they were just actors on a TV show. So by connecting with influencers, although at the time they would not have been considered influencers, outside of the TV world of Friends, it was able to bring popularity to the show and sort of create if Robin Williams is willing to be on Friends, then I should be willing to watch Friends. And those people who they put on the show, they chose very carefully because they're people who are still currently relevant and hopefully will stay relevant for as long as the show Friends stays relevant. There's not a lot of guest stars who you can't watch today if you've never seen the show and not know who it is, like Winona Ryder, Robin Williams, Billy Crystal, tons of people who guest starred on the show who are still famous today and were brought on to sort of bring some hype to the show. Number 7, they created mysteries outside and within the characters. So obviously there were a lot of things going on with the actual Friends cast. Jennifer Aniston had a very public breakup with Brad Pitt during the show, or I believe maybe right after the show. So there was a lot of stuff going on in the world outside of Friends. But within the show as well, they always had cliffhangers, which is just obviously not something we can really do in marketing, but we can always create mystery with our brand and with our content in the same way that a show can create a cliffhanger at the end of a season. Number 8, be adaptable. So this is very similar to how the characters had to grow up. There were a lot of things in the 90s that suddenly weren't PC in 2004. And so they had to change. They had to make movements. They had to make the characters grow up. They had to make the show grow up with the characters, because watching the show about 6 people who refuse to forget that they're in their 20s and move on and be in their 30s would have been boring. So the show was adaptable, and the show's marketing and writing was adaptable to meet the needs of the audience. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, we're going to take those 8 strategies we just talked about and use them in your marketing. So stay tuned for that because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquesh, and I'll be right back.
Are you a business owner? Someone interested in the latest news that might affect your business? Then check out the GSMC Business News Podcast, a show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. The GSMC Business News Podcast has you covered.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquesh, and on today's episode, we are talking about what gave Jennifer Aniston her start, what gave Courtney Cox her start, Matthew Perry, Matt LeBlanc, David Schwimmer, Lisa Kudrow, all of those crazy cats that we now know today from their famous movies and TV shows and other projects they've done. Where did it all begin? It began with 6 people having coffee at Central Park. But what I want to talk about is not the illustrious careers of Jennifer Aniston and David Schwimmer, but instead what I want to talk about is, why do we all still care about a show that was over decades ago and is coming up on like their 30th anniversary? How did they do that? How did they rope all of us in to continue to believe that this show is worth watching? I said earlier in the podcast that every Friends character, the 6 of them, still gets $20 million every year from the show. Warner Brothers Entertainment still makes $1 billion every year off of the show. How did they do that? Before the break, I told you exactly how they did that with marketing. And now that you're back, I hope you're ready because I'm going to give you those 8 strategies and how we can use it in your marketing. You might not be selling 6 people drinking coffee at a coffee house. You might be selling socks. But I'm going to tell you how to create the cult following that Friends has for your sock company. So get ready, guys, because we are jumping right in. Number 1, knowing your customer. Understanding that you know the importance of selling to people, not demographics. So I talked about how Friends knew that, 20-year-olds are watching our show. That doesn't mean we should amp up how much we talk about the fact that they're in their 20s. Instead, we should talk about things 20-year-olds have problems with, and we should act like we're 20 because we are 20. We hire 20-year-old actors and so on and so on. So what I'd like to ask you, in your sock company, we're going to use sock company for a little bit now. In your sock company, when you take a look at your demographics and you realize that you sell a lot more baby socks than anybody else, what's your plan of attack? Are you going to jump onto Instagram right now and write, "We sell baby socks, everybody, just in case you forgot"? No, don't do that. That's silly. Everyone clearly already knows you sell baby socks. They're buying them. What I want you to do right now is get onto Instagram and just show one photo of a baby wearing your socks and how much the baby loves wearing your socks. This way you're not saying, "Hey guys, we're aware the demographics really want these baby socks, so just a reminder, we sell baby socks." Instead you're saying, "Hey look, this baby really likes our socks. Does your baby like our socks?" You know the answer is yes. You know a conversation's going to get going. And that's exactly what you want. You want to start a conversation. You want to push people who are already buying their baby socks there to continue buying their baby socks. And on the other end, you can take a look at your demographics and say, okay, it looks like a lot of grandmas aren't buying our socks for their grandma feet. They're buying them for their baby feet. What can we do? We have a ton of grandma socks. All right, buy one, get one sale. 50% off all grandma socks. buy a pair of baby socks and get a free pair of grandma socks. This seems silly because I'm saying grandma socks quite a bit. But what I'm trying to get at is use your demographics to understand the people and why they're buying the product rather than just selling to demographics. Number 2, consistency across all channels. So this is something that Friends did by utilizing their message and ensuring that although the characters were growing up, although the storyline was changing, the core of the show was always consistent. It was always 6 people who truly, truly cared about each other. So what I'd like you to do right now is take a look at your sock company. Take a look at your baby socks. Take a look at your grandma socks and find what the one consistent thing is between the two. Because I'm telling you right now, I think I know it. It's the fact that you like making sure people's feet are warm and cozy and not itchy. By the way, if you sell socks that aren't itchy, I'm buying 10 pairs. I have not been able to find a pair of socks lately that aren't driving my feet crazy. Guys, that's besides the point. I'm getting off track. What I'm trying to say is find your consistent message and then ensure that all of your content, baby content, make sure everything you are pushing out has that consistent message. Your brand and your image and your product and everything can change. Everything can be adaptable. We're going to talk about that later. But that core message needs to stay the same. That's what the consistency across all channels is really talking about. Number 3, know what sells and market it hard. We talked about how the Rachel hairstyle was something that the team of Friends Marketing created because they understood that it was something outside of the show that they could exploit. So what is something outside of your sock company that you understand people really love and would probably want to buy more of? Maybe it's the fact that one time you were selling baby socks that had little giraffes on them and a couple people commented, oh, I wish I had a pair of those that were in my size and my baby size because I would like to have matching socks with my babies. Guys, I'm not a mother. I don't know if this is a thing mothers want. It might be. I don't know. If it is, let me know. Write it in the review down below. But what I'm trying to say is that if you recognize a ton of people were commenting that, then create that. What is stopping you from creating a mother-baby line or a daddy-daughter line of socks? I would personally love to have matching socks with my father. I know that for sure. So for anybody out there running a sock company, there you go. I just gave you an idea. You're welcome. Number 4, do not be afraid to stand out. So Friends by no means was the most original idea. Like I said, Jerry Seinfeld thinks that he was ripped off because Friends was very similar to Seinfeld, and we're actually going to talk about the similarities later on. But they still weren't afraid to stand out and have storylines that were exciting and different and you hadn't seen on TV before, and have characters you hadn't seen on TV before, and have messages that you hadn't seen on TV before. Because point number 5 is stand for something. And a storyline that a lot of people didn't enjoy was Rachel getting pregnant and then not marrying Ross. And they stood beside that storyline because they weren't afraid to stand out. So those two definitely go hand in hand with your marketing. You need to stand for something, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to take on being a single mother. But stand for the fact that your socks are the coziest socks on the market. And do not be afraid to stand out because your socks are made out of 100% flower petals. Like, I know that sounds silly. Obviously, I know nothing about making socks. But don't be afraid to stand out, and don't be afraid to stand by the thing that makes you stand out. Number 6, connect with influencers. So obviously, Friends had a large group of influencers to pull from. They had Brad Pitt on the show. They had Billy Crystal on the show. They had Robin Williams on the show. You don't have Brad Pitt to come market your socks. But what influencers do you have? Every city and every state of America right now has a couple of young high schoolers who have thousands of followers on Instagram who would be so freaking pumped to wear your socks and to write a social media post about wearing your socks. Connect with influencers in your network, in your city, in your town, in your country, because although you might be like, oh, they only have 16,000 followers and maybe only 4,000 of those followers are actually going to click on the ad. So what? That's 4 new customers you didn't have. And those 4,000 new customers are going to tell their 500 followers. And those 500 followers are going to tell their 1,000 followers. And things are just going to keep building and building. Influencers, and by the way, guys, there's a whole episode of the podcast about influencers and social media influencers and the power that they have today in our society and in our marketing. So go listen to that as well, for sure. But they have such an important position in marketing today that you really can't be afraid to connect with them. Number 7, create mystery. So Friends obviously created mystery by having cliffhangers at the end of seasons or having relationships resolve and break up and previews and promos and all these things around it. Ross and Rachel were obviously like 10 years in the making, so people were always like wondering what was going to happen next. It kept that mystery alive for 10 years. How are you creating mystery with your promotions? And a really great way to do this is a new product is coming soon and then drop hints about what it is. Make people guess at what it is. Make people engage with your product without you ever revealing what the product is yet. Create a buzz about the product before you ever release the product so that when you release it, people are so excited to find out that it doesn't matter if it's just another standard pair of white socks. They've been waiting for like 2 weeks to find out what it is. So there's excitement built around it and people are going to be engaging with your content and with your product. Number 8, be adaptable. This is so important, guys. I want you to have consistency across all of your channels. I want your brand to be consistent. I want your message to be consistent. But if there's something in your messaging or in your product that becomes outdated or irrelevant, then you need to be adaptable to change and you need to be willing to change with the times and with your product. Say that you owned this sock company in the 60s and you were using real animal fur. That is not something that would be acceptable in today's world of using real animal fur for your socks. And it's something that you would have to be adaptable to change and be able to say, okay, we're not going to use real animal fur anymore. Instead, we are going to use a polyester cotton blend. That's being adaptable. That's a change you can make that is not going to ruin the consistency of your message. So all I'm saying, guys, is just be aware of the world around you and be adaptable to change. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, I'm going to talk about the top 10 brands that celebrated the 25th anniversary of Friends. These are brands that have no profitable gain from the actual TV show Friends. They're not Warner Brothers, who's pulling in the extra $1 billion a year from the show, but they have profited from the marketing of Friends by just utilizing it in their own marketing. So we're going to talk about all that and more on the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakush, and I'll be right back.
Are you looking for a podcast that gives you all of the latest news from the world of finance? Then check out the GSMC Financial News Podcast. We'll delve into the ups and downs of the stock market, changes in the economy, and news from the world of real estate and technology. From breaking news on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, or the overseas market, to updates on the bond market, if there's money to be made, we'll cover it on the GSMC Financial News Podcast.
And welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakush, and today's episode is so incredibly close to my heart. I'm so incredibly excited and happy to be recording it because it is our 30th episode of the podcast, and I know a lot of people probably don't think 30 is a big number, but gosh, I've been getting to do this Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 30 episodes now, and that is just so incredible. And if you think it's incredible, if you benefit at all from this podcast, then please make sure to subscribe up above and write a review down below. because I would absolutely just love to interact with you guys outside of the podcast as well. So if you want to write a review on what you would like me to talk about, questions you have, even if I don't have the answer, I'll do the hunting for you and I will find that answer for you. So guys, let's build this podcast together. Let's do 30 more, 100 more, 1,000 more episodes together of content you actually want to listen to and content you enjoy listening to. But the only way I can do that is if you write a review down below or reach out through social media. Today's episode, I picked a really special topic. I talked about Friends, and we've been talking about the Friends marketing strategies, some stats and facts about the famous six, and we talked about how you can use some of those strategies they used to create the cult following that is Friends in your own marketing, even if you sell socks. You don't have to sell Jennifer Aniston to create the same cult following that she has. So we talked about all that, and now what I want to talk about are these 10 brands that have benefited from Friends without actually being connected to Friends at all. And this all came around of their 25th anniversary. A lot of brands decided to celebrate the historic day by representing the show Friends in their own marketing. So these brands had nothing to do with the show while it was on, now that it's off, but they decided to celebrate the birthday, not only just to celebrate the 25th anniversary, but these brands definitely benefited from the show without actually having to do any of the work that went into creating the 236 episodes of Friends that we still all watch to this day. So number one is McDonald's. Around the 25th anniversary of Friends, McDonald's released fries, which was spelled F.R.I.E.S. And it was spelled in the same logo as Friends and the same coloring. And it was just a simple change that they made to their branding for the day of the 25th anniversary. But it was to celebrate the show and to sort of, get in on a little bit of that baby content that everybody was generating the buzz for and everybody was really excited about. So it was a great way for them just to hop onto that bandwagon without having to pour in a bunch of money, resources, and time. I mean, guys, an intern probably made that on their phone and then just posted it on Instagram. So simple, so easy, but it was a really great way to benefit from the buzz that was already being created around the 25th anniversary. Some brands went a little more hardcore, such as Mother's Dairy Ice Cream, which released the Joey's Special. This was a special order that you could have around the anniversary of the show. It was a limited edition order, and it was like extra scoops of ice cream were in it. There was just all these extra accoutrements on top of the ice cream that people just knew Joey would order. And so it was a fun way not to at all be branded with brands. I mean, they didn't have the logo, they didn't have Matt LeBlanc eating it, but just calling it the Joey Special, that's something that wasn't copyrighted and that they were able to pull from for their own marketing while still selling their product. Pottery Barn did something a little bit closer to actually being involved with Friends and being involved with Warner Brothers. They released a one-of-a-kind special edition apothecary table, which was modeled directly like the one that they bought on Friends from Pottery Barn. So this was a more direct way to take something that was actually involved with the show and sell it back to the audience by saying, hey, remember this episode? We actually have that. Go ahead and buy it. Lego did a very similar thing to Pottery Barn, that they actually were fully connected with the show and with Warner Brothers and with the marketing around the 25th anniversary. They released a special edition Central Perk Lego set that featured all 6 characters in their Lego versions of themselves and the Central Perk set that you could build with your friends and family. AS Clothing benefited from the 25th anniversary by releasing the Friends sweater. This was an oversized sweatshirt that just simply had the Friends logo. Obviously, they were involved with Warner Brothers Entertainment, as that is a logo that is copyrighted. But it was just a great way to celebrate the anniversary, and this is a product that was released on the 25th anniversary, but can still be sold today, as Friends is still relevant today. Alex and Annie, which was a jewelry collection, came out with a special one-of-a-kind edition Friends X bracelet that featured a little tiny red lobster and a little pin beside it that said, "You are my lobster." Now, the wording of that is super important because they don't actually say that in Friends, so they actually can't copyright it. They don't say, "You are my lobster," or whatever it may be. And a lobster, obviously, is not copyrighted either. So whether or not Alex and Annie, the jewelry collection, actually collaborated with Warner Brothers, it doesn't matter because that was a way that it wasn't copyrighted, but it's so closely related to Friends that people are still gonna be attracted to it and still want to be engaged with it around the 25th anniversary. Funko Pop figures. Now, this was another one that was associated with Warner Brothers and with the NBC Entertainment, because Funko Pop figures came out with a special edition Friends Pop figure set that you could buy for $100. The full collection, you get all 6 characters. And this new Funko Pop figure set came with characters in the costumes you may not have been able to buy before, such as like Monica, Chef Monica, Rachel back in the 80s, Phoebe dressed as Supergirl. Like, there were just special edition versions of them that they hadn't released yet. Trivial Pursuit Friends Edition. That's just a great idea. Everyone is already constantly doing trivia about Friends. Like I said, it was hard to find marketing stats and facts about Friends because there was so much trivia about Friends. So Trivial Pursuit Friends Edition, that was just a smart idea. That was smart on everybody's part. On Warner Brothers, on Trivial Pursuit, on Jennifer Aniston. Anybody who was involved with that idea, smart. Nike. Kyrie Friends t-shirt was released with the Friends inspiration on the sports brand Kyrie Collection tee. So instead of saying Friends, it spelled out Kyrie. Now, the Kyrie Collection was something that was already being sold at Nike, so this was a great way to combine a bunch of different brands together and sort of celebrate the anniversary and, everybody make a little extra money. So definitely never a bad thing to combine all these different brands together if they're all of equal demographics or just have a similar buzz about them. Number 10. This is probably why I was in the mood to talk about socks earlier, guys, because Varsity Socks came out with a special edition of Friends socks. The reason I put this as number 10 is because all these other things, you could argue, have so much to do with the TV show or the branding of the show or the message of the show. But socks? How did they sell special edition socks? They just say Friends on the top of the sock. Who bought that? They were $30. Who bought $30 socks that said Friends? Not me. I definitely didn't, and I love the show. But if they sold, good on you, Varsity Socks. That was a great little marketing you did for them, and maybe I should do a whole podcast about that. I'm not going to. Don't worry, there's not going to be a podcast episode about socks. Unless you want to see that. If you want to see that, write it in the review down below, because, hey, I can be adaptable. Just like the Friends marketing, just like your marketing, I can be adaptable. If you guys want an episode on socks, I'll do an episode on socks. I'm here for you. I'm here to serve you. All right, everybody. So we're going to go ahead and take our last break of the podcast. But when we come back, we are going to talk about the top 10 shows that had a similar buzz and a similar cult following as Friends. But obviously their marketing is as good, just as good, but they did not create the same level as Friends did, because really, what has created a similar following as Friends, guys? If you have any ideas before I talk about the list, write them in the review right now, so maybe you can beat me to the punch. All right, everybody, we'll be right back with more of the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and I'll be right back.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
And welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the podcast. Today's episode has been a lot of fun, and it's definitely so exciting for me and hopefully for you as the audience when I get to do episodes like this, because it's a topic I am sincerely excited to talk about, which is why, by the way, the past 30 episodes, I have sincerely wanted to talk about every single one of those topics. I was excited every day to crack this mic and just get to talk about all of those things, and I hope to continue getting to talk about marketing with you guys for 1,000 more episodes, for 100 more episodes, whatever you want, but I need to know what you want. So if you have suggestions, if you have critiques, if you have compliments, if you have just a joke, write it in the review down below or reach out through social media, because I'd really love to hear from you guys. I think it'd be a lot of fun that we continue this conversation outside of the podcast. So definitely reach out with any questions, comments, or concerns, because guys, I'm always over there. I'm always listening. Okay, so now that we're back, we've talked so much today about Friends marketing. We've talked about some stats and facts. We talked about how Warner Brothers Entertainment still brings in $1 billion every year from Friends, and that every cast member still makes $20 million from Friends every year. I'm sorry. What? Why are any of them still currently working? I would be on a yacht. I would be done. You're making $20 million every year from a show you no longer work on? You're done. You're set. You're good. Go home. Let the rest of us work. You're good. We then talked about how you can use those marketing strategies in your own marketing to create a similar cult following and phenomenon that Friends had. I talked a lot about how consistency across all of your channels is so incredibly important, that you always have that main message that will carry through all of your content, but that you always need to be able to be adaptable to the world around you and to the world and the society that is happening while you are selling your product. We then talked about 10 brands that benefited from the Friends 25th anniversary, even though they were never really related to Friends. We talked about how McDonald's just put out a simple post spelling fries instead of Friends with the branding. So, simple way just to interact with a cult phenomenon without actually having to put in many resources into the actual project. Now that we are back from our break, I want to give you guys the top 10 shows that had similar followings to Friends because of their marketing. And hey, if you think any of these are worth exploring more, make sure you write it in the review down below, because I would love to take a deeper dive into these shows. So let me know. Number 1, of course, we were going to mention Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld himself has often said that he believes Friends was a ripoff of Seinfeld. Whether or not that is true is besides the point. Seinfeld has a huge following that is still very active today in the same way that Friends is still active today. I'm not sure how much money Seinfeld is still bringing in for NBC, but I mean, Jerry Seinfeld can make comedians in cars drinking coffee, so clearly somebody has a lot of money, is all I'm going to say. Number 2, How I Met Your Mother. How I Met Your Mother's popularity was definitely a similar level as Friends while it was on the air. Unfortunately, now that it's been off the air, the following is definitely not as severe or as dramatic as the Friends following is, but who knows, we'll give it a few years. It really did just go off the air. We'll give it a few years and see if the cult following sticks around or if it just becomes a show that we all eventually forget about. I don't know. What are your thoughts on How I Met Your Mother? I really liked it when it was on, but now it kind of just seems like a thing of the past. Number 3, The Office. This was the show that beat Friends and which show was streamed more on Netflix. Of course we were going to talk about it. The cult following for The Office is bigger than, I think, any TV show on air ever. I don't know how close neck and neck it is with Friends, but come on, guys. The Office is huge. Whether you've seen it or not, I would actually say that's probably the biggest difference. I feel like most people have seen Friends, and that's why it has such a big following, where not a lot of people have watched The Office from season 1 to season 9, but everybody knows what The Office is, and everybody talks about it, and it's on everybody's Instagram page right now. If you open it up, I bet you can find a meme from The Office. Number 4, Community. Community also has this huge cult following. However, the show itself was not as successful as Friends or The Office or How I Met Your Mother or Seinfeld. Instead, they just have this huge cult following that will not give up on the show. They keep asking for more episodes or the movie. The 6 seasons in the movie is still a trending thing. So the cult following and the community built around the show Community is definitely very strong and very similar to the Friends following. Number 5, The Big Bang Theory. This show is very similar to Friends in the way that it's just people living their lives, and they understood what they had and how to market it properly to make it one of the most popular shows on TV. The Big Bang Theory had 40 seasons? Or 16 seasons? It's crazy how long that show progressed for. However, it does seem to be following in the similar footsteps as How I Met Your Mother, in that it's not super popular today. People aren't currently still talking about it. It's still not currently something that's at the top of everybody's minds in the same way Friends is. Number 6, Cheers. The sitcom that started all sitcoms. Of course Cheers has to make it on this list because, really guys, this opened up to the idea of, people can just sit around and talk and we'll watch it. That's all Cheers is. You'll notice Frasier didn't make this list because I don't think Frasier is as popular as Cheers. Fight me though. Write that in the review. If you think Frasier's more popular than Cheers, let me know. I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that. If anybody has thoughts on Cheers versus Frasier. I don't know if anybody does, but if you do, let me know. Number 7, Parks and Rec. Parks and Rec is the younger brother to The Office. Definitely as popular, definitely as big of a cult following, but not as big in the way of everyone's going to remember it till the end of time, in the same way that I think The Office will be sticking around for quite a few decades. Number 8 is New Girl. New Girl was actually considered, I don't know if a lot of people remember this, but the way it was promoted was as being like Friends, but not. That's sort of how they promoted it. They used Friends marketing to sort of benefit themselves, which makes sense because it is about people in their 20s who love each other like a family, even though they're friends. So New Girl definitely has similar themes and different marketing styles as Friends. However, the popularity of the show doesn't quite reach the same level as Friends. Number 9, Will and Grace. Will and Grace was actually on at the same time as Friends and had a very similar popularity and cult following. So popular, in fact, that they actually got their reboot. And they got a full, 4 extra seasons of the show just because of how obsessed people were with the fandom and with the show itself. Number 10 has to be on this list. Of course, I had to talk about it, guys. Sex and the City. Sex and the City came on before Friends, but was actually constantly compared to the Friends just because they were all living in New York and they were all young and being fun and interesting people, but also being human people. And Sex and the City has had such a cult following that, they had their 6 seasons and then 2 movies, and they actually had a script for the 3rd movie. This show has an unbelievable community surrounding it and a cast that genuinely wants to keep creating that content, which is so great and so unique to a show that, hey, I would actually consider doing an entire podcast on Sex and the City. So if you want to see that, make sure you write it in the review down below. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening to the 30th episode of the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the GSMC Marketing News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to any podcast app, and you'll find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news, you'll find it all on the GSMC Podcast Network. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.